This is East Asia Tonight.
Good evening, I'm Ateli Edwards. Tonight's top stories. Israel says that Iran will pay a heavy price for a missile attack that struck a hospital. China urges calm in the conflict, while Iran warns the US against intervention. North Korea fires more than 10 rockets from multiple launches just a day after joint air drills by South Korea, the US, and Japan. Now, the man tapped to be South Korea's next spy chief pledges a return to dialogue with the North, but warns of a nuclear response from the United States should Pyongyang strike first. And New Zealand halts funding for the Cook Islands over deals it made with China, just as PM Luxon visits Beijing for high-level talks. And the Tokyo Stock Exchange sees a rush of firms delisting, the trend welcomed by the market operator amid its push for a better deal for shareholders. Ahead on East Asia Tonight, Chinese companies own stakes in dozens of European ports. Some EU lawmakers say it's a security threat, calling for tighter controls on foreign ownership. And the rush is on to see a historic residence in South Korea. Tens of thousands of people flock to the Blue House in Seoul before the new president moves his office back in. Fighting between Israel and Iran showing no signs of stopping. Calls for de-escalation are growing, with China repeating its message to the warring sides to put their people first. Well, the conflict has entered its 7th day, and U.S. President Donald Trump is weighing Washington's involvement. At least 47 people injured after Iran's latest barrage of missiles on Israel. Several of them struck populated civilian areas, including a medical center in the country's south. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has vowed to make Iran pay, quote, the full price. Defense Minister Israel Katz says that the Prime Minister has ordered the military to intensify attacks on Iran. Meanwhile, the Iranian Revolutionary Guard said that it's targeting Israeli military and intelligence headquarters. Those attacks come as Israeli missiles hit a key nuclear site in the Iranian central city of Arak. It houses one of Iran's heavy water reactors, part of its nuclear program. Well, the IDF also struck a site that contained components and equipment used for nuclear weapons. Local news sites say there is no radiation risk from the attacks for now. Right, for more, we have Trent Murray joining us live from Tel Aviv. Trent, harsh threats there coming from the Israeli officials following this morning's attacks. What else do you have for us?
Yeah, well, a very large wave of those Iranian ballistic missiles arriving just after 7 a.m. local time here. We know once again Tel Aviv seems to have been the main target. We do know there were a number of impacts in two suburbs, Holon and Ramat Gan, about a 15-minute drive from where I am. We certainly heard very loud booms during the morning, during those interceptions. At one stage, the building even shook a little bit, seemingly signalling that kinetic energy that often arrives following those interceptions was nearby. But we are also keeping a close eye on this hospital strike in the south. Now, this was the Soroka Medical Hospital in the city of Beersheba. Now, that is Israel's biggest hospital in the south, so it's a major medical facility. We are being told yesterday that a number of patients were evacuated from the surgical wing of the hospital. Now, that is where the missile reportedly hit. Israelis authorities are heralding that evacuation as potentially saving many, many lives. But we do also know the hospital has suffered significant damage, and it is telling people in the area not to come to it because doctors and nurses there cannot provide medical care right now, given the state of the facility being in a pretty damaged state.
Trent, meantime, the countries are increasing their calls against an American involvement in a conflict. Trump saying they may or may not get involved. What are the Israeli authorities saying about this?
Well, I think the Israeli message right now is that they are going to continue their military operations. Certainly in the wake of what we saw this morning, the rhetoric seems to be increasing, and we are being told that there will be further operations and air attacks by the Israelis throughout the day. I think they are aware that there is some diplomacy taking place. We are being told that Iran's foreign minister will meet tomorrow with his European counterparts from France, Britain, and Germany, as well as the EU's top foreign policy chief. But while those diplomatic talks are taking place, of course, there is this strategic ambiguity, I guess you could describe it as, wondering whether the Americans are going to get involved here. President Trump has certainly shifted tone in recent days, saying he wants to see Iran offer its unconditional surrender. We've just had a new threat now from Israel's defence minister before coming on air, where he has called for Israel to take out the supreme leader of Iran, saying that Ayatollah Khamenei cannot be allowed to continue to exist. It's a very strong threat and, once again, a representation of the escalation we are seeing.
All right, no signs of either side backing down. Well, thanks, and do stay safe. Trent Murray reporting to us live from Tel Aviv. Now, governments across the world are moving quickly to evacuate their nationals from the conflict zones. Japan is among them, with Tokyo ordering military planes to be on standby as its citizens flee from Iran and Israel. A top government spokesperson, Yoshimasa Hayashi, said on Thursday that the country's self-defense forces aircraft have been sent to Djibouti in Africa, a holding area for the planes, more than 2,000 kilometers away from the fighting. Evacuating Japanese nationals are expected to be first taken by bus to neighboring countries. The Foreign Ministry also says that there are about 1,000 citizens living in Israel and about 280 in Iran. South Korea, meantime, took 20 of its nationals and family members to neighboring Turkmenistan, where a rapid response team from Seoul was waiting to help with evacuation efforts. Separately, transport and assistance were also given to 23 citizens leaving Israel for Jordan. China, meantime, says that its embassy in Israel will help Chinese citizens to leave in batches, also from Friday. The operation will take evacuees to Egypt by bus via the Taba border crossing. On Wednesday, Beijing said that nearly 800 of its nationals have been evacuated from Iran to safe locations, with 1,000 more in the process of leaving. North Korea, meantime, has criticized Israel's attacks on Iran and warned the U.S. and Europe against, quote, fanning the flames of war. The Foreign Ministry said that the attacks risk a new all-out war in the Middle East and called Israel's killing of civilians, quote, an unpardonable crime against humanity. And for more coverage of the Israel-Iran conflict, do log on to CNA.Asia for the very latest, including this explainer on the U.S. bunker buster bomb that could reshape the clash. South Korea's military says that North Korea fired more than 10 rockets using its multiple rocket launches this morning. Well, the rockets were launched from Sunan, near the capital Pyongyang, and toward the northwest. This comes a day after South Korea held live-fire artillery drills near the border. Analysts say that Pyongyang may have been responding to that or to the trilateral air exercise between the U.S., Japan and Korea, also on Wednesday. This is the first three-way military training between the allies since President Lee Jae-myung took office. Staying with South Korea, the country's spy chief nominee says that he believes the United States will strike the north with nuclear weapons if Pyongyang launches a nuclear attack against Seoul. Mr. Lee Jong-suk was answering a question at a nomination hearing today on what Washington's response could be if the North attacked. He's set to head the country's National Intelligence Service under new President Lee Jae-myung. The South Korean president had promised to build a peaceful and stable Korean peninsula, and the spy chief nominee said that he will support these efforts to ease tensions with Pyongyang. He also vowed to strengthen the National Intelligence Service's capabilities on North Korea, saying defense and dialogue can work together for peace in what he called a virtuous cycle. In other news, China says that its cooperation with the Cook Islands does not target any third party, nor should it be interfered with. This follows New Zealand's pausing of fund to the Cook Islands over agreements the Pacific Island nation signed with Beijing. Officials say this amounts to about $11 million in budget funding. Wellington says significant new funding will not be considered until the Cook Islands takes concrete steps to restore trust.
The decision was made slowly because we were asking a series of questions in writing, and not getting satisfactory answers. That is, satisfactory answers that would be for us to account to the New Zealand taxpayer, and also, more importantly, to the Cook Islands people, the diaspora, both there and across the world, in Australia and New Zealand in particular.
New Zealand, along with Australia, has become increasingly cautious about China's growing presence in the Pacific region. While the Cook Islands is a self-governing state, it has a special constitutional relationship with New Zealand. The two countries commit to consult on security, defence and foreign policy issues. The Cook Islands signed a strategic partnership agreement with China in February. Prime Minister Mark Brown had signed the deals, including cooperation on deep-sea mining, education scholarships and the establishment of diplomatic missions. Mr. Brown said that New Zealand was asking for too much oversight on its deal with China. He said that agreement did not replace long-standing relationships with New Zealand, Australia or others, but complemented them. News of the funding freeze coming as New Zealand Prime Minister Christopher Luxon is in China. He is expected to meet President Xi Jinping and Premier Li Qiang on Friday. And when asked whether the move could upset China, Mr. Luxon appeared to brush off concerns, saying it's an issue between the Cook Islands and New Zealand. He also echoed his Foreign Minister Winston Peters' views that the Cook Islands are not being transparent about what it's negotiating on. In Beijing, Mr. Luxon is expected to raise his country's concerns about China's activities in the Pacific. Likely among them, the first ever live fire exercises by the Chinese Navy in February in the Tasman Sea between Australia and New Zealand. The exercise had caused alarm in Wellington as well as Canberra. Well, time now for a short break, but coming up next on East Asia Tonight. East Asian markets weigh the Fed decision overnight and geopolitical conflicts. We look at how the markets closed. And Japanese companies are leaving the Tokyo Stock Exchange at a record pace as firms receive capital inflows through attractive shareholder value. Hello again, you're watching East Asia Tonight, and we have business news coming up right now with Roland Lim. So, Roland, I can't keep track, but there's just so much happening in the world right now. How is it affecting the markets?
Well, let's start with the most obvious, Asian stocks. Hong Kong markets have led the declines in East Asia today as investors weigh the Fed decision to keep rates steady overnight. Let's take a look at the Greater China markets. Benchmark Hang Seng Index nearly 2% in the red for the day. Shanghai Composite down 0.8. Second Bourse, the Shenzhen component down by 1.2%. Mixed picture in other Asian markets amid rising geopolitical tensions in the world. The Nikkei 225 in Tokyo down by 1%, bucking the trend. Benchmark Kospi Index is up 0.2. And here in Singapore, the benchmark STI ending 0.7 in the red. The currency is also reacting to central bank decisions. The Philippine Central Bank, BSP, lowered its benchmark rate by 25 basis points to 5.25%, as widely expected. And again, as expected, Taiwan's authority held its policy rate steady at 2% due to the strong performance of its tech-focused economy and subdued inflation. The Taiwanese dollar weakening against the greenback by 0.12%, 29.57 Taiwan dollars changing hands with $1 US, and the Philippine peso also weakening by 0.4%. Zooming in on Korean markets, the government in Seoul says it will implement a second supplementary budget worth some $15 billion nearly. The aim is to revitalize the economy after what's been a politically tumultuous period. The plan includes cash handouts, debt relief, and gift certificates to spur private consumption. As mentioned earlier, the Kospi is up 0.2%, tech-laden Kosdaq up 0.4% nearly, and the Korean won weaker by 0.16% against the dollar. The Czech Republic signed a contract earlier this month with South Korean power company KHNP in building 2 nuclear reactors. The resulting power generation will provide electricity for almost 11 million people in the European nation. But the agreement could face complications after French tender rival EDF raises complaints. Now, KHNP beat EDF in a tender last year to supply the two units. But the EDF is alleging state support for the South Korean company, which is illegal in the European Union. The crucial argument for Prague was the low price offered by KHNP. But questions have been put to the EU as to whether this price was achieved by a Korean state subsidy. EDF previously delayed the deal by months after it questioned the transparency of the tender in an antitrust office and court. The court's rejection of the complaint led to immediate signing of the deal in mere hours. The lower instance court is due to pass its verdict next Wednesday. Yoshinoya, well known worldwide for its beef rice bowls, announced plans to take their ramen business global. The restaurant chain's new CEO, Tetsuya Naruse, said in May that there were significant business opportunities in other countries and that the company aims to serve the most bowl of ramen noodles in the world per year by fiscal 2034, 10 years' time. Yoshinoya's vice president has high hopes for ramen sales.
現時点でまで100億円ぐらいの売上規模でございますので、これを400億円までしていくということで、花丸丼にほぼほぼ近しい売上規模に5年内で持っていきたいということを考えておりますし。
The move comes as Yoshinoya diversifies its international offerings away from the signature beef bowls. The dish has grown less lucrative as rice prices in Japan skyrocket, and a weak yen drives the import costs of beef. Instead, the company plans to increase the share of ramen sales by 13% of its total sales from 4%, and bringing beef bowl sales down to 61% from 67%. Other expansion plans include investing $275 million into acquisitions the next 5 years. Already, the company has bolstered its portfolio by acquiring 2 ramen shop operators last year. Data from the Tokyo Stock Exchange shows that companies are leaving the bourse at its fastest pace in over a decade. The trend is reflective of recent surge in deals and buyouts among listed companies. The number of firms that delisted their shares from the Tokyo Stock Exchange or announced plans to do so has reached 59 in the first half of this year. A year earlier, that number had been 51. Now, based on data going back to 2014, should this pace continue, the figure for 2025 will exceed last year's annual record of 94 companies. The Tokyo Stock Exchange says that the numbers are actually a welcomed development. The TSE has been pushing listed companies to offer higher shareholder return or face being taken off the bourse. The initiatives made Japanese shares one of the world's best performers in recent years, while encouraging activist shareholders to demand changes from companies. And as a result of foreign investor interest, there have been closer scrutiny of share buybacks, while mergers and acquisitions have soared. Nippon Steel says that the U.S. government's golden share in U.S. Steel will not stop it from making any management decision that it deems appropriate.
私どもがですね、何かやりたいことについて阻害されるということはありません。US スチールの後もさらなる海外での事業拡大を考えておりますので、この学びを生かしていきたいと、このように思っております。
Mr. Hashimoto made the remarks today, a day after Nippon Steel concluded its acquisition of U.S. Steel, following 18 months of protracted negotiation. He also thanked U.S. President Donald Trump for pushing ahead with the deal, adding that U.S. tariffs increases the strategic importance of the acquisition of U.S. Steel. Tony Waterman has more from Washington.
This deal had been in the works for 18 months, a deal that was highly politicized with concerns that an acquisition would pose a national security risk to the U.S. and lead to job losses and a shift in production abroad. So to get this deal over the finish line, Nippon made some remarkable concessions, including a golden share agreement, which gives U.S. presidents a direct say in company decisions like capital investment, salary factories and layoffs in perpetuity. According to Nippon Steel, the U.S. president will have to sign off on things like relocating the company's headquarters or moving jobs abroad. And this is just an incredible level of government control in a private business, and something that has not really happened before in this type of foreign acquisition. Nippon also agreed to invest an additional $11 billion into the company by 2028. Now, President Trump had originally opposed this deal. He didn't want to see an iconic American company sold off to a foreign buyer, even if that company came from a country that is an ally. And his predecessor, Joe Biden, was also against it. And he actually blocked the deal from moving forward when he was in the White House. Trump's team, though, was quite clever in these takeover negotiations, rebranding it instead as a partnership. And the model with this government involvement could set a new benchmark for how deals that once would have been blocked on national security grounds may be negotiated in the future. Tony Waterman, CNA, Washington.
It's day 4 for the Paris Air Show, and so far, Asian carriers have dominated orders for Airbus jets. This as IATA forecasts that Asia Pacific will account for more than half of net passenger increase by 2043. Let's recap on what's been signed so far. Starting off big, Vietnamese low-cost carrier Vietjet has signed a deal for up to 150 single-aisle A321 neos, including 50 on option. It's a deal estimated to cost more than $9 billion. Japan's ANA also purchasing some 27 A321 series jets, including 10 of its neo and 3 of its extra long-range models for its Peach Aviation subsidiary, making it the first Japanese airline to operate the A321 XLRs. And just yesterday, Taiwan's Starlux signed an order for 10 A350-1000 wide-body jets, which are expected to be deployed on its mid- and long-haul routes when deliveries start in 2031. And over in the Middle East, Saudi carriers splurging as well with new airline Riyadh Air, placing an order for 25 A350-1000s with an option for another 25. The Saudi Sovereign Wealth Fund-backed airline was granted permission to begin commercial operations in April and aims to fly to more than 100 destinations by 2030. A Saudi-based AV Lease also signed an initial order for 40 Airbus jets with an option for 37 more. This is part of plans to be the global lessor, to be the top 10 lessors by the end of the decade. Together with other airlines, Airbus has signed more than $21 billion in orders so far, while major competitor Boeing, has faced a muted response. And that'll do it for Business Hotel.
Thanks so very much for that, Roland. Right, time now for another break. But coming up on East Asia tonight, U.S. President Donald Trump says that Beijing will need to bless the TikTok deal after Washington extended a deadline for a third time for the popular social platform to find a non-Chinese buyer in America. Can the ban be extended indefinitely? We ask an expert. This is East Asia tonight, and here are the headlines we are following. Israel says it will make Iran pay for a missile attack that hit a hospital. Iran warns the U.S. against interfering, and China calls for calm. North Korea fires more than 10 rockets using its multiple launches, one day after joint air drills by South Korea, the U.S. and Japan. The Tokyo Stock Exchange sees a rush of firms delisting. The trend welcomed by the market operator amid its push for a better deal for shareholders. It looks like President Donald Trump will sign an executive order this week to extend the deadline for TikTok to be sold by China's ByteDance by another 90 days. Now, this would be the third time Mr. Trump is extending the deadline, otherwise due to expire today. An estimated 170 million Americans use the app. But American officials say that Beijing is collecting data on U.S. citizens and using the app to influence public opinion, allegations TikTok has denied. Well, the White House says the president does not want the app to go dark and is working to close a deal that will allow Americans to continue using TikTok while keeping their data safe. All right, for more on this, let's bring in David Tuffley, a senior lecturer in applied ethics and cybersecurity, Griffith University. Well, thanks, Dr. Tuffley, for joining us this evening. First up, I thought we could just address some of the legal and political implications of this. First up, what exactly are the implications of a president that's repeatedly overriding and delaying the enforcement of a law that's passed by Congress as well as being upheld by the Supreme Court?
Yes, well, from the spirit of the law that was passed, it's not really acceptable that it should get extended and then extended and now extended again. The president does have the legal authority to actually do this, so he's not breaching any laws by doing it, but it is causing quite a bit of tension with Congress. Because it goes against the spirit of the law that was passed, which is aimed at guaranteeing data security, that personal data collected from American users is not being sent back to China for whatever purposes it might be used for there. So there are national security implications, but there's also a fairly solid economic argument because there's over 100 million digital creators and people who advertise on TikTok. It is a major source of revenue. It's an economic force in its own right. So, and also, President Trump did receive quite a bit of benefit during his campaign by reaching the demographic that uses TikTok. So it's a complicated situation. Doesn't look to be any end in sight just yet.
So, in other words, how do we interpret this, that there is no legal limit to how many times a ban like this can be extended? And also, at what point does this repeated delay undermine the legitimacy of the original law?
Well, I think it's already undermining the legitimacy, although the force of that act of Congress is not in question. The security implications are beyond dispute, at least in the Americans' minds. China has denied that they are using this data for anything, but it appears that that is an issue, a sticking point. And it really does look as if this whole business with TikTok is bound up in the broader US-China trade negotiations. And I think, there's quite a lot of horse trading going on and will probably go on for a little while longer. But I don't think it's going to go on indefinitely. It's just, extended, tough negotiation going on.
So then, how do you think the public should interpret this cybersecurity claims that's entangled with all the trade negotiations that you're talking about? How high up on the list is it, on the Chinese side and on the US side when they're using TikTok as a form of trade negotiation?
Yeah, I think it's probably not top of their list of important concerns, but it's certainly an important concern in its own right. It's certainly not at the bottom of the list. The sums of money involved are really considerable, and the revenue potential of TikTok is in the tens of billions. And so, it's a substantial industry. And I guess because it is a digital it doesn't really own very much property. It's all digital, and digital property has value, but establishing the value and using it as a trade negotiation ploy is, it's new ground, really. I don't think we've seen anything quite like this before, where two major powers are locked in negotiations, and part of that is the value and the proprietary knowledge that is contained in TikTok. So yeah, it's a pretty big deal, and I think that probably within 6 to 12 months we'll probably see things reach some kind of conclusion. On the American end, Oracle and the others have proposed a situation where Oracle will guarantee the security of the data that is collected from American users. But the algorithm that collects it is still owned by ByteDance, the Chinese parent company. So that would appear to be a satisfactory sort of arrangement, and it was moving towards a conclusion fairly recently. But as I mentioned, part of the larger trade negotiations, China then backed out of it, probably because in response to the higher tariffs being imposed by the US. So, there's a bit of back and forth going on there.
Yeah. So, Dr. Tuffley, you said the algorithm will still be owned by ByteDance. So, in the meantime, ByteDance, it's continuously rolling out all sort of new AI tools for the advertisers and whatnot. So, do you think the U.S. is essentially allowing China-linked tech to entrench itself deeper, even though, it claims to be decoupling?
Yes. Well, to give the Chinese credit, they are extremely good with their algorithms. The TikTok algorithm, just the whole package, the whole deal with TikTok is unbelievably sophisticated. That's not to say that the American platforms are not likewise sophisticated, but it's pretty clear to me that the algorithm is a very important piece of intellectual property, and ByteDance China are keen to retain that so that it doesn't get sort of released into the American environment. So it is coming to the point, I think, where they just have to agree that Oracle and its partners can handle the data security side of things, which is, after all, the letter of the act that was passed is all about safeguarding the privacy of that American data. The algorithm is a separate issue, and I think it's only fair enough that the Chinese retain ownership of that.
Okay, so 6 to 12 months, as you've mentioned, before we see some kind of deal being reached. We will be looking out for that. Thank you so very much for your insights there, David Tuffley, Senior Lecturer in Applied Ethics and Cybersecurity, Griffith University. Well, there are growing calls from European lawmakers to tighten controls on foreign ownership of the bloc's critical transportation infrastructure. Chinese firms own stakes in more than 30 European ports, and some EU officials see this as a security concern, as William Denslow finds out.
These are vital arteries for the European Union. Roughly 75% of goods entering or leaving Europe do so by sea. Europe's major ports handled more than 800 million tonnes of goods in the third quarter of last year alone. Essentials ranging from food and energy to military equipment pass through these maritime gateways, making them potential security targets.
Threats they don't always come in a form of war. The modern threats are even hard to see, like the GPS signal interference, cyber attacks. We have the case as well of the damage of internet undersea cables.
The European Commissioner recently flagged concerns over foreign ownership of what the EU calls critical transport infrastructure, with particular attention on the flow of information through the ports, such as details of sensitive NATO operations. Member of the European Parliament Ana Miguel Pedro is among those calling for tighter regulations.
We need to address not only the capital, but as well the control. Who has the operational access? Who manages the data? Who supplies the port software?
Unease has lately centred on the Chinese firms who have a large footprint across Europe's ports. Companies such as Costco and China Merchants control stakes in over 30 of the continent's biggest terminals. Such investments intensified over a decade ago, encouraged by a European port sector heavily in debt. But a recent report from a Polish think tank suggests a growing anxiety over potential conflicts of interest, given China's unofficial backing of Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Konrad Poplavsky is the coordinator for connectivity and regional integration at the Centre for Eastern Studies.
We see that strategic interests are drifting apart. And therefore, having an actor or even private entities in a strategic infrastructure under influence of such partner, it's not anymore so sustainable as before.
The port of Antwerp-Bruges is the second largest in Europe and has attracted major investment under China's Belt and Road Initiative. In a statement provided to CNA, the port says a balanced approach is needed when it comes to foreign investment, and the goal should be to effectively detect and prevent undesirable foreign interference without hindering the openness that fuels economic growth. The need to keep trade flows open is echoed by the China Chamber of Commerce to the EU. Its Director of Communication and Research, Lin Liang, says discussions relating to security must be based on facts. Last year, EU-China trade stood roughly at $970 billion, or about a third of global GDP.
First of all, they were transparent. Secondly, they were compliant they complied to the EU and national level laws. So we should not ignore the facts. And thirdly, as I said, so it's very important to distinguish and not to politicize the business sector and the trade sector.
The US and China have clashed over influence in the Panama Canal in recent months, heightening concerns over maritime transport infrastructure. The issue of foreign ownership of ports is increasingly on the radar of European officials. Some lawmakers are now pushing for perceived strategic vulnerabilities to be addressed over the coming months. William Denslow, CNA, in Antwerp.
Coming up on East Asia tonight, a London court is set to sentence a Chinese national for drugging and raping 10 women. We'll get the latest from our correspondent. A Chinese PhD student found guilty of drugging and raping 10 women is set to be sentenced today in London. Zou Zhenhao, a 28-year-old engineering student, attacked women in the UK and China between 2019 and 2023, filming many of his assaults as souvenirs. Now, police said he also kept a trophy box of his victims' belongings. He was convicted of multiple counts of rape and voyeurism and also possessing extreme pornographic images. For more on the case, we are joined by Laura Westbrook in London. Laura, Mr. Zou, he's set to be sentenced later today at the Inner London Crown Court. What can we expect?
Yeah, I'm here at Inner London Crown Court. We are awaiting the sentencing of Zou Zhenhao. Now, he is in the building behind me, and we are expecting to hear some victim impact statements, as well as the judge will read out a sentencing statement. Now, Zou Zhenhao was found guilty in March of 28 offences, including 11 counts of rape against 10 women in London and in China. Now, he was a PhD student at the time of his arrest, which follows after a woman reported that she had been raped in her flat after being plied with alcohol. Now, during the 4-week trial, prosecutors said that Zou, who was a student reportedly from a wealthy family, was a serial rapist, and that between 2019 and 2024, he met women on dating apps and other online platforms and invited them back to his flat under the guise of studying or drinking, where he would drug them using drugs such as ecstasy or another drug that converts into the chemical GHB in the body. And he would and then carry out his attacks. He also secretly filmed these attacks on his phone, as well as using hidden cameras. And officers discovered nearly 1,300 videos. Zhou claimed that these acts were consensual as part of some sort of role play, but the evidence reportedly showed women unconscious, as well as some begging for help. He also kept what prosecutors have called a trophy box full of belongings of some of these women.
And Laura, since Zou was first caught last year, more of these women have come forward seeking justice. And as you've mentioned, the police has uncovered even more evidence. So what are we looking at here?
Yeah, the Met Police have said that this is one of the most complex investigations that detectives have carried out. According to police, around 24 women have made reports following this appeal that the police made, seeking that they are looking for victims to come forward, because they believe that the victims from Zou Zhenhao were much more widespread. According to the police, they said there is evidence that there could be at least 50 further women who could be victims. So they have made this appeal, calling for more women to come forward, and around 24 have done so. The police have called that a significant step in its ongoing investigation. They say some of these women currently live in the UK, some live in China, and that just shows the scale of this investigation, that it crosses borders. And police have said they do believe that there are still more women who are unidentified. They are also liaising with the Crown Prosecution Service here in the UK to as they gather their evidence. And that means that there is a possibility that we can't rule out a second trial as well.
Right, many thanks for that report. CNA's Laura Westbrook in London. Turning our attention to Thailand now, where Prime Minister Paetongtarn Shinawatra has apologized for a leaked phone call with former Cambodian leader Hun Sen. Now, the conversation triggered a political crisis and now threatens to collapse a government. Ms. Paetongtarn says that the leaked audio has caused public resentment. Now, basically, the audio captures her telling Hun Sen that she is under domestic pressure and urging him not to listen to, quote, the opposite side, referring to a senior Thai military commander involved in an ongoing border standoff with Cambodia. The fallout has been swift. Her main coalition partner, the conservative Phum Jai Thai party, has pulled out of the government. The party is accusing her of damaging the country's sovereignty and well-being of the country and Thai army. Now, that exit leaves Ms. Paetongtarn with a weakened majority in parliament and mounting calls to resign. Two other coalition partners, the United Thai Nation and Democrat Party, will hold meetings to discuss the situation later today. Meanwhile, the military has issued a public statement saying that the army chief reaffirms his commitment to democratic principles and the protection of national sovereignty. It called on Thai people to remain united in defending the nation. And earlier we spoke with Michael Montesano, Associate Senior Fellow at the ISIS Yusof Ishak Institute. And he first explained what factors are at play that could keep Prime Minister Paetongtarn in power or see her vacate the role, now that the Phum Jai Thai party has withdrawn its support for the government.
I think what we need to focus on is first the political management skills of her father, former Prime Minister Thaksin, who will be working overdrive to try to hold the coalition together. The second thing we need to focus on is whether the coalition partners, the remaining coalition partners, will be able to withstand pressure coming from three potential places. First, Thai popular sentiment, which will be riled up after the contents of that call have been released. Second will be the Thai military, which of course is now putting on a brave face, but will want to have its say in terms of what goes forward. And third will be the palace. We don't know the view that the palace takes of ongoing developments, and that view clearly needs to be kept in mind.
Dr. Montesano, the Phum Jai Thai party says the Prime Minister, Paetongtarn, must show responsibility for making the country lose its integrity, honor to the people and the army. Is that a call for her to resign, or is it a call for her apologize and do something to restore, I suppose, and to appease the nationalists, who seem to have a strong voice in the country right now?
Well, political expediency would argue for that being a call for a deal. For Phum Jai-tai first to be able to retain control of the Interior Ministry, which has been a subject of much controversy in recent weeks as the Pheu Thai party has staked its claim to control of that ministry in anticipation of coming elections. And second, we need to bear in mind that the Phum Jai-tai is subject to inquiry on the part of Thailand's Electoral Commission because of alleged manipulation of voting for the Thai Senate. Now, Phum Jai-tai clearly would be pleased if, A, that inquiry could be called off, and B, it could remain in control of the Interior Ministry. That having been said, the surface level point that it's making, that she has done something extremely unfortunate and spoken in a way that really betrays her standing as Thailand's head of government, is a fair point. And urging her to resign would seem to be quite a legitimate demand on the part of anybody in Thailand, not just the Phum Jai-tai party. In the case of the Phum Jai-tai party in particular, before we talk about specific political issues, it has very shrewdly positioned itself in recent years as the bearer of the conservative cause in Thailand. And in that sense, putting pressure on her to resign, staking out a position as a defender of Thai nationalism is very much consistent with the way that the Phum Jai-tai party has, again, very deftly positioned itself in recent years.
Now, some headlines from media outlets in East Asia. On Nikkei Asia, a 93-year-old survivor of the bombing of Nagasaki is calling for peace, warning that the multiple hot wars today can lead to nuclear war. He told university students he was disappointed with world leaders' handling of conflicts. Now, in southwest China, local authorities have ordered an immediate stop to a wake-up call service involving red pandas at a hotel after online photos showing young children in bed with the endangered animals went viral. The Global Times report says officials are investigating. And former South Korean President Moon Jae-in's bookstore drew the biggest crowd at a Seoul book fair this week. Mr. Moon opened a bookstore after he stepped down from the presidency. And the Korea Times says he made a surprise appearance even at the event for about 20 minutes. Now, in South Korea, hundreds of thousands flocked to the Blue House in central Seoul in recent months to see the historic compound. Well, access to the area will be stopped in mid-July as it returns to official use as a home and office for the country's president, Lee Jae-myung. His predecessor, Yoon Suk-yeol, in 2022 moved his office and residence out of the compound in a break with tradition and opened it to the public. Well, the move triggered debate at the time, with opponents accusing Yoon of favoring feng shui over safety and relocation costs. Just so you know, feng shui is a philosophical system from ancient China that studies how the environment relates to people's well-being. Now, visitor numbers surged after Yoon's impeachment and eventual ouster. Tours of the staterooms and manicured lawns are fully booked in the coming weeks.
줄을 1시간 정도 기다렸지만 정말 너무 즐거웠고 설레었고 앞으로 이제 이재명 정부가 어떻게 해 나갈지 그런 큰 희망을 갖고 즐겁게 봤던 것 같습니다.
조만간에 아마 이쪽은 폐쇄가 되는 걸로 알고 있거든요. 그래서 폐쇄되기 전에
한번 오고 싶어서.
네, 오고 싶어서 왔습니다. 그리고 와서 보니까 깔끔하네요. 여기 왜 옮겼는지 모르겠네요.
And that wraps up Thursday's edition of East Asia Tonight. Don't forget your headlines anytime at cna.asia. Thanks for watching.